5 years ago, I was paying $65 a month for my subscriptions. Today, those same subscriptions cost $111, and I don't even use half of them anymore. That's why now I use Rocket Money to manage my subscriptions for me. The app gives you a list of all your subscriptions and reminds you of upcoming payments so you're not hit with any surprise charges. On top of that, it also sends you alerts when subscription prices go up, so you always know the price you're paying. If you decide you no longer want a subscription, you can cancel it right from the app. No customer service needed. And the best part is, Rocket Money even reaches out and tries to get you refunded for some of the money you lost. On average, people that cancel their subscriptions with Rocket Money save $378 a year. And overall, Rocket Money has saved its members $880 million in canceled subscriptions. Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Go to rocketmoney.com/cancel to get started. That's rocketmoney.com/cancel. rocketmoney.com/cancel.
I was surprised that Jeremy Corbyn added 2 percentage points more than I had expected, and I did say that I would eat this book, which is available at all good bookstores. So what I'm going to do is just sit here and eat my book while you guys carry on. It's actually a hardback. There are lots of chemicals, but I've got to get through the whole thing, so...
Welcome to Quiet Riot, the politics podcast that is more reflection than defection. I'm Andreou.
And I'm Naomi Smith. Our mission, to take shapeless noise and anger and form it into reliable information and action.
Plenty of choices for people who want to be told, isn't this terrible? We're here to inject warmth, humour and reason into the chaos that surrounds us.
So pour yourself a lemsip, commandeer the dog as a heating pad, and get ready for this week's Quiet Riot.
Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot. I'm Alex, an actor with range.
And I'm Naomi, an agent of change.
And I'm Kenny. I'm just pretty strange.
Now this week all eyes on the 26th of February in that Gorton and Denton by-election as Labour try to repair the damage denying Burnham has caused and Reform welcome Suella Braverman to their benches and parachute Matt Goodwin in as a candidate. But are the Greens this contest's dark horse?
And while America threatens to descend into civil war internally and Trump threatens more wars internationally, and Ukraine-Russia talks end with little progress, Trump constitutes a new board of peace, open, it seems, to anyone with $1 billion to spare for a bribe. So we have a chat with our own Arthur Snell about whether he harbours great expectations or expects hard times.
Well, just hearing all that, I am suddenly very aware that we have a lot to get through. So let's get cracking.
Quiet Riot.
All too often nowadays, our conversations about Labour end up sounding like that Mitchell and Webb sketch where the hapless Hennimore is left in charge by his boss, given only one thing he must definitely not do, only for disaster to follow. On Sunday, I said, the one thing Labour must not do is block Burnham. By Monday, I was predictably shouting, Hennimore! Not to worry, just as the Burnham story was gathering pace, Reform UK stepped in to knock it pretty much out of the news by unveiling their latest transfer window signing, another attacking right-winger, Suella Braverman. She tried so hard, brave Suella informed us. For more than a decade, she soldiered on, climbing higher and higher, all the way up to Attorney General, then Home Secretary for the year that saw the peak of net migration, endorsing, then betraying, Johnson, then Truss, then Sunak, then Badenoch, until they took a hint and stopped putting her in their cabinets, at which point brave Suella had the courage to call time.
So I'm calling time. I'm calling time on Tory betrayal. I'm calling time on Tory lies. I'm calling time on a party that keeps making promises with zero intention of keeping them.
A day later, Reform announced yet another signing, another right-winger, one that plays so far to the right he's outside the stadium selling unauthorised MAGA scarves. Scourge of the new elites, Matt Goodwin. Naomi, first things first, what do you think of the decision to deny Andrew Burnham permission to run in the by-election, given our conversation on Sunday?
Well, when you were going on with the Mitchell and Webb stuff at the top, and I was thinking about all of the polling surrounding Labour and the by-election and Manchester more generally, I thought you were going to shout number wang. Because I think that's probably the more likely analogy that's going to be made on all of this. More seriously, you and I talked about it, you're quite right, on Sunday. And I think the weekend probably ended with a very good outcome for Wes Streeting. Potentially Angela Rayner won't have been that unhappy, depending on the outcome of her HMRC hearing. A long way back then, Starmer will have felt some relief, and obviously, a bad weekend for Andy Burnham. I think Starmer may have bought himself a little time by making sure one of his many competitors for the top job is out of the picture for a bit longer. But this isn't going to reflect well on Labour or help them out in this particular by-election at all, let alone how fractious now the Parliamentary Labour Party are. So, yeah, I don't think this is going to help him out in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the view from some Labour people that this gets very negative headlines, but at least it gets them out of the way quickly and early. And it's a sort of quick peeling of the plaster rather than have then months of speculation about when will Andy Burnham make his move.
I mean, what they have done is move the writ to have a very, very quick by-election. You said at the top of the show, 26th of February. What that is usually a signifier of is that the defending party don't have great hope for winning it. This tends to be what happens if you move an election quickly. And all this can really do is stop Reform spending their extremely deep coffers very effectively. It doesn't give them much time to spend money in campaign, which was kind of the last card left Labour had to play, having got themselves into quite a difficult situation. So it is going to be a quick turnaround, and the campaigns are beginning to put literature out already. And obviously Matt Goodwin we're going to talk about in terms of being the first named candidate that we know of. There was a lot of speculation about whether, obviously, Zach Polanski was going to run. Apparently, no, he is not. But also George Galloway, because when we look at the profile of a seat like Gorton and Denton, it is extremely diverse, much more so than many other even areas of places like Manchester. You've got a very significant Muslim population there. You've got Muslim councillors, and you've got probably 40 plus of the percent of the residents identifying as coming from an ethnic minority background, and about 30% being Muslim. So it's a very diverse group. And so George Galloway kind of tipped his, will he do one last, throwing his hat literally into the ring for this one? No, but his party has selected councillor for the area, one of the wards within the constituency, Shabazz Sarwar. So he is now named as a candidate as well. And by the time this episode goes out, who knows, Greens and Lib Dems and others may have declared, we believe that it will be the 31st of January when Labour announces its candidate.
Now, Reform are trying quite hard to present Goodwin as a local candidate. This has not been helped a huge amount by a video resurfacing. Let's just have a little listen.
I was lucky enough, or unfortunate enough, to be in Manchester a few days ago, and the energy in this room is 10 times what it was in Manchester. So, congratulations.
How is that going for them, Naomi?
How is it going for him? Well, he'll hate that video doing the rounds. He was an interesting choice. I can understand why they would want him as a candidate, but as a candidate there, I didn't see it coming. I don't think many people did. I think it took a lot of people by surprise when the announcement happened on Tuesday, and it was 30p Lee Anderson who introduced him onto the platform and announced him as the chosen candidate for Gorton and Denton. He is a wild choice for that seat, is all I'll say. And we'll see how it plays out. But yeah, I'm glad that video was found. And I think first call to action, listeners, is to make sure you've all shared it too.
I mean, it's slightly unfair because he was obviously talking about the conferences, but fuck them, They twist plenty of stuff that wasn't even said. They even put out doctored stuff.
You have to go back to Alan Clark in the 1980s. To find a time when constituents voted for an MP who openly derided them.
It's interesting because I think, having seen a video that Zach Polanski put out on Wednesday morning, and the choice of Galloway's party and the first few bits and bobs that have come from Goodwin, I think they are very much planning to fight this along identity lines rather than political lines. So basically, Goodwin has been chosen because he's openly quite Islamophobic. Polanski, his video on the campaign leans right into that and says, this is a diverse community. Labour have disappointed everyone on Gaza, so Greens are the only party to vote for if you want to stop a racist winning this seat. So it's going to be an ugly campaign, I think.
I think what is interesting in particular about this is that the front-runner parties aren't brilliant at running by-elections. I mean, the only party in the country that is absolutely a by-election machine is the Liberal Democrats, and they are not going to put any serious effort
they
into
don't
this
really
at
have a
all.
base there, do they?
They don't have a base there. They will name a candidate on the ballot paper, but I doubt they'll spend any money there whatsoever, and they'll be very comfortable to lose their deposit and let other people get stuck in on this one. But when you look at parties like the Greens, who have had this enormous surge in membership, do have a lot of success around the country in council elections, and obviously had, for them, stonking success in the 2024 general election. But by-elections aren't something that they have got that institutional memory for, that muscle memory for. And they really struggle on things like data collection, because until, I think, very recently, and I don't even know if it's up and running yet, they haven't had a kind of electronic canvassing tool. So most of the parties, if you go out canvassing with them, and I've been out with most of them, will make you download an app to your phone, and it tells you, right, go and knock on this door. We think they are soft conservative leaning, or we think they are Reform voters or Labour voters, whatever. And you knock on their door and you say, hello, I'm from wherever. They tell you how they're thinking of voting, or more often than not, they tell you to get lost. And then you enter that data into the app, and then that goes back to the central campaign, so they can know whether to squeeze that voter again before polling day, whether to leave them alone, whether that person needs to hear from the local candidate because they had a particular issue they cared about. And the Greens haven't had that level of sophistication. Even at the 2024 general election, it was all very manual, clipboards, paper, scrawly handwriting about what somebody had said to you, and then you handed it in at campaign HQ for somebody to try and make sense of and type into a database. So I'm a bit worried that even though they could probably do very well, they won't have access to that kind of stuff. And then similarly, Labour aren't brilliant at by-elections, and it's always very difficult for any governing party to win in a midterm by-election anyway, particularly when you've decided not to go ahead with an incredibly popular candidate.
There's another thing that, you're talking about basic on the streets competence there. And I do wonder whether this by-election is going to become a test of whether British politics is drifting towards a state of permanent spectacle. You've got the parachuted personalities, and you've got parties, they're treating a by-election like a content farm. And I do wonder whether the danger isn't who wins one seat. It's whether it's this idea that we're normalizing an approach where attention matters far more than competence.
My sense is that this will be an election where we see something like the Caerphilly effect being duplicated. And what I mean by that is whoever manages to capture, as it were, the title, the crown of most likely person to win reform, has a good chance of voters coalescing behind them and boosting them quite significantly.
And herein lies the difficulty, Alex. I think you're identifying the issue entirely correctly. What I don't think is that we know the answer. I've come from a meeting with the pollster John Curtis this morning in Parliament, and we were talking a lot about tactical voting in a cross-party environment in Parliament today. The big issue that came through is that tactical voting works well when it's really clear who the party is that is the most hated, and therefore it becomes a bit more obvious as to who to back to stop that hated party. And John Curtis made the point, I don't know if he meant it specifically for Gorton and Denton, but I think it does apply. He said, it is unclear who is most hated. Is it Reform and the fear of Farage being PM? Is it a Labour Party that a lot of voters will feel have let them down over Gaza and maybe other issues around cost of living and whatever else? Or is it the last Conservative government that is still being blamed for 14 years of getting us into the awful situation we find ourselves in? So I think he was sort of worried that tactical voting is going to be extremely difficult, not least because, of course, Labour are going to say it's a two-horse race between us and Reform. The Greens are going to come along and go, no, look at all the polling, shows that it's much closer than that, we can win here. And that the poor voters of Gorton and Denton who do want to stop Reform are going to find it extremely difficult to know exactly which way they're meant to cast their vote.
Maybe. I won't agree entirely, because I think there will be a pool of people disdainful of both Labour and Reform, and Green provides them a way to give both a kicking. And so I think that's why the Greens are ahead in the betting. I know betting markets are not really polling, but they are an indication of
They
where
can be as
people are
correct,
putting
if not
money.
more correct than polling.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
No,
But,
I think it is.
but
for the
it
Greens
is
to
quite
be
eye-catching for them to be ahead.
Yep, definitely.
On the betting markets, having come from nowhere really in that particular constituency. And I think that's why. I think because they provide a very easy way for local voters to kick both Reform and Labour. Let's see who they choose as a candidate. That's obviously the key issue here. If Labour choose someone that's very popular locally and someone that Burnham can support properly, not just show up and go through the motions, I think Labour's odds are better than most people think of holding on to that seat. But we'll see. Kenny, we hear that the Parliamentary Labour Party have basically been told to move to Gorton and campaign. Is there a concern in Wales and Scotland that this is kind of sucking resources from what is ostensibly a more important contest coming in May?
I mean, that's an interesting question. Starmer himself said that allowing Burnham to run for a Westminster seat would divert Labour's resources from campaigns in May elections. But, it is an important by-election. And of course, resources are going to be pulled from wherever they're needed. There's a couple of points, though. Firstly, we should remember that there are a couple of crucial campaigning months between Gorton and the May elections. While the logistics are not ideal, they are hardly catastrophic either. They just aren't. Secondly, turning to your question about Scotland and Wales specifically, in Scotland, we're not necessarily seeing this as Labour literally siphoning off their entire team from Scotland to Gorton. But there is a concern that the backlash over Burnham could sap morale and momentum right across Labour's 2026 campaign. Similarly, in Wales, with the Senedd elections coming up, Welsh Labour is keen to keep focus on local priorities. Of course it is. And avoid Westminster infighting becoming part of the story there too. So the Labour infighting in Wales and Scotland is far more significant than the logistical challenges because it opens Labour in both countries up to the accusation that they would represent a wasted vote in the Senedd and Holyrood elections because of the Westminster Party's control freakery. And of course, terms and conditions apply, but that is very definitely not a message that Labour will want to hear on the streets of Edinburgh or Cardiff.
But that takes the result for granted. If Labour managed to hold on to this seat, despite all expectations, doesn't that then boost the morale in other elections that are seen currently as hopeless, to say, actually, if we work hard and push on local issues and select the right candidates, we can still win?
Without a doubt, a Labour win will boost morale. Of course it will. But you cannot overestimate how potentially damaging in Senedd and Holyrood elections a message that everybody is just a puppet up here or over here in Wales, and the strings are all pulled for Westminster. It's an incredibly dangerous message, and it's a huge opportunity for everybody else to really get stuck in. And the result in Gorton and Denton won't actually change the risk because the control freakery has already been demonstrated. So, I think it's across that Labour are going to have to bear whatever the result.
Quiet, Riot. Quiet, Riot.
Naomi, you've been looking at a little bit of, there's no direct polling on this, but there's a little bit of polling about how the Burnham factor is currently playing with Manchester voters.
Yeah, Find Out Now polling did a poll of Manchester-only voters. I think it was a sample of about
big
1,000.
caveats about Find Out Now, by the way.
Yep, big caveats.
We explored them with Sam Friedman. They select their sample in a slightly odd way that there's a chance it might affect it, and that's why they're served in outliers. But given all that, what does it show?
So this is 1,000 people in Manchester, field work done 23rd and 24th of January. They asked Manchester people a range of questions, but there are two that are pretty interesting. One, they asked them about how they'd vote if there was actually a general election the next day. And then they asked them, and if there were a general election and Andy Burnham was standing in your constituency. So this isn't Gorton and Denton, this is the whole of Manchester. Obviously, he is mayor for that whole area, and you get quite a big difference. So only 15% of people in Manchester saying if there was an election tomorrow, they'd vote Labour. This is a Labour city, a Labour-run city council, a Labour
Wow,
mayor,
that's really
lots
quite
of Labour
extraordinary.
MPs, and Reform on 22. Then the Greens, Lib Dems and others way further behind, and of course the Tories too. But if you tell them that they would be electing as their MP Andy Burnham, so you could read that as a proxy for if Andy Burnham was leader of the Labour Party and potentially Prime Minister, that isn't what they've asked. It is just, if he was your candidate, then Labour go into first place on 32, Reform get knocked back to 18, putting them level pegging with Don't Know, and I would not vote, and then no change really in the ordering for the other parties. But yeah.
That is a big flip. Which is why I don't buy into this, I think, well-intentioned narrative saying this just pulls the plaster off very quickly and kind of makes a big noise, but the story then goes away. Because if Labour end up losing this seat, then the story will be that Keir Starmer would rather basically lose a seat to Reform than have it won by a rival.
And it's also a reminder of how incredibly important the recognition factor is in politics, just as much and perhaps more so than when you're selling cola or cars. The recognition factor, now, and it can be a positive and it can be a negative, of course, but the work that goes on behind the scenes to ensure that candidates are recognised, even more so oftentimes than policy work, is so significant. And there's no doubt about it. Somebody with the recognition factor of Burnham has a huge advantage over whoever else Labour plump for, simply by dint of that recognition factor.
While I was surfing the latest tables that find out now, by the way, you may be interested to know that Rupert Lowe commissioned some polling very, very recently, 15th of January. It only asked two questions. How likely would you be to consider voting for a political party led by Rupert Lowe MP? And the second question was, in a general election, if there was a party led by Rupert Lowe MP, how would you vote in that election? That's interesting, isn't it?
Yes.
Mirror, mirror on the wall.
Yeah, but someone's paying for this, right? And considering he had declared that his only interest is in his local constituency and he has no plans to launch a national party, I think it's quite interesting that he's paying money. Do you want to know the results, by the way?
We do.
Please.
So how likely would you be to consider voting for a political party led by Rupert Lowe MP? Very unlikely, 30%. Somewhat unlikely, 4%. So that's 34% unlikely. Somewhat likely, 5%. Very likely, 7%. So that's
12.
a total of 12% for likely. And don't know, 55%.
Who he? New phone.
Otherwise known as who the fuck is Rupert Lowe? And on the second question, in a general election, if there was a party led by Rupert Lowe MP, how would you vote in that election? A party led by Rupert Lowe MP got a total of 4%.
Excellent.
I have to say, the most eye-catching stat in that is that don't know is 36% and would not vote is 15%. That's an actual majority. And the percentage is significantly higher if you just look at women. It's 45% and don't know, and 17% would not vote. That's a total of 62% of
Almost
women.
2/3 of people saying, just make it all stop.
Yeah, I don't want to even know, which is quite depressing.
I do wish they'd asked the question, if Rupert Lowe led a party into the election, would you stick pencils up your nose and headbutt the desk?
Yeah.
Alex, we talked at the top of the show briefly about the myriad of defections to the Reform Party, including, of course, Goodwin, but now Suella Braverman. And you said that each of these is a risk to Reform, that they're morphing into the party that got rejected so roundly in 2024. At the rate they're accepting them, They don't seem particularly concerned, though.
They don't.
So are they
They're
right
not
or are
bothered.
you right?
That depends on Kenny's excellent question. If we are looking at an environment where all that matters is who gets the attention, then it doesn't matter, because all that matters is that Reform UK keep the media focused, keep the spotlight. If we are in an environment where content matters, there is trouble brewing for Reform. And there was actually some polling done on that. A good third of Reform voters are very unhappy about this constant stream of defections. And 2/3 of the party believe that it's just cynical reasons. They're just doing it to continue their career in politics because they know that the Tory party is sinking. And so if the offering is that we are fresh and different to the other parties, then working so hard to fill your ranks with people that are considered cynical and typical politicians by your own voters does seem to me a risky strategy. And I think the reason they're not seeing it as a risky strategy is because they're betting on the Kenny paradigm, basically, that all that matters is attention, which is also the MAGA paradigm in many ways. All that matters is just capturing the news cycle.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that simple. And the reason I don't think it's that simple is because I think it creates internal risks as well. All these very ambitious people, used to being senior, used to having their voices heard, are suddenly in an environment where they're not the tallest poppy. They're suddenly in an environment where they're pissing off other people who were with the project from the start, but now are seeing all the plum jobs going to others. And I just wonder how long before we see them beginning to brief against each other, because that's what they're used to. They have existed solely in a party which is all about positioning, backstabbing, and getting yourself to as high a post as you can. And so I find the notion that all these leopards, now having moved to the leopard face-eating party, will suddenly change their spots, to torture that metaphor. I find that very, very unlikely. It's only a matter of time before we see the first defection from Reform to someone else, God knows who.
Well, and there's a very good reason for that, because for a lot of Reform voters, the Conservative Party is viewed as being an absolute plague ship. And anybody coming from that ship carries the plague. And it doesn't matter whether they're a great commander or whether they're the cabin boy or whether the ship's cat. They come from the plague ship and they bring only badness. And the reason Reform, of course, are succeeding is because so many voters have run away from that plague ship.
I think rather than leopards, I think the animal analogy is too many piggies, not enough teats.
Oh.
The thought of Nigel Farage as a big sow with tits hanging out is not a pleasant one. Kenny, meanwhile, we have a new player on the scene in the form of Prosper UK, described by Quiet Right alumnus David Cork as, and I quote, a new centre-right movement in British politics. Explain yourself.
Hurrah, new right political influence, what we've all been crying out for. Prosper UK then is a new centre-right political movement launched by, well, it was headed up for the weekend shows by senior Tories Ruth Davidson and Andy Street. And what they want to do is pull British politics back towards the centre-right and appeal to millions of politically homeless voters. I think we agree that there is a void in the centre-right of British politics, who feel abandoned by both the Conservative Party and Labour. Now, they've got a really heavyweight list of supporters from the world of politics, but they're not trying to become a new political party or stand in elections, at least for now.
So are they a momentum type operation that will try to influence policy and maybe get candidates selected in local constituencies, or are they more like a think tank?
You wouldn't see them describe themselves as a think tank, and you won't see them describe themselves at this stage as being active on the streets, if you like. They're not there yet. They're playing a softly game.
At least they're playing a game. About bloody time.
Well, exactly that. Nobody can deny that there is a huge centre-right chasm in our politics. And so the organisation is certainly addressing a real political need. Now, big question, they're old school, and whether they will be punchy enough to compete with our headline political entertainers. Whether, they're going to be able to fire up that recognition factor and make use of it with some proper headlines remains to be seen. But there's a second point for our listeners in particular, I think, and it's something to be aware of. Prosper UK is really quite careful to avoid talk of Brexit. When pressed on Brexit so far, they've been really at pains to emphasise they don't want to restart that war.
I wonder if they could emerge a bit like the relationship that the Cooperative Party has with Labour, where you have some MPs who are the Labour and Co-op member for XYZ, and it could be a kind of nod to this is a one nation kind of Tory candidate.
I think that this is one to watch. They are heavyweights, they are old school, and they are playing a careful game at the moment. But with the Tories shedding their most right-wing cheerleaders to reform, it may well be that they see an opportunity to see some control back for relatively moderate Conservative voices, particularly if the May elections go badly for their party.
Maybe. So, who do we reckon will be the next to defect from the Tories to reform? Let's do a quick whip around. Naomi.
Rumours this week have mostly focused on Gavin Williamson, former chief whip. So yeah, a lot of talk about him, but there are quite a few names. But I think this is a quick fire round, and I'll go with him. What about you, Alex?
Sir John Hayes, I think, given his close links with Sir Braverman. David Frost openly praising Braverman for defecting. Joy Morrissey, I'm surprised she hasn't already. But I think the next defection from the Tories to reform they will unveil is the BBC's Chris Mason. That's what I'm going for. How about you, Kenny?
You've gone with the two favourites. I mean, I really want to see Gavin Williamson go there. It just seems so appropriate. The other name that is getting mentioned in some circles is Katie Lamb, Tory MP, and she's kind of on the fence, but recent defections in her own circle and the direction of the Tory party in general, I think you could add her to the list that's got Gavin Williamson and Sir John Hayes on it as well.
What about Rees-Mogg?
I don't see it, weirdly, people jumping across, with the possible exception of Danny Kruger. They're not people you'd consider thinkers, are they? Rees-Mogg is slightly smarter than that. It seems a little bit soon to be jumping across. Let's see how things go over the next couple of years. Did you see there was an extraordinary photo being circulated that showed Boris Johnson's 2019 first cabinet after his election? The full thing, a total of about 30 people standing in the Rose Garden for like the family photo. And only 4 of them are still Tory MPs. The rest of them have either been thrown out of the party, left the party, defected, lost the election, or retired from politics. And so I think that says something about the Johnson effect.
It does, and that runs in parallel with that statistic now that, of course, there are more former Tory MPs who are Reform MPs than there are original Reform MPs.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just like, the madness is just taken over.
Okay, I think you have quite a cheeky call to action, don't you, Naomi?
Yeah, I want you all at home to send us in what vote share predictions you're going to give each party running for the Gorton and Denton by-election. We can't promise an award anything other than smug feel-good factor, but follow us on Blue Sky, send it in via email to quietriotpod@gmail.com and let us know what percentage of the vote do you think everyone's going to get.
Quiet Riot.
And now for that recurring segment where the culture wars continue to rage, mostly in the comments section, and usually about something nobody's ever heard of. Once again, the internet has been very busy, being extremely upset, very loudly, and often for reasons that remain theoretical. It's time for Wokie Dokie.
Wokie Dokie.
So, Alex, brave explorer of the algorithmic abyss, what strange new species of woke have you uncovered this week?
Today's gem comes from an ex-grifter and YouTuber who says he, and I quote, became a #1 best-selling author by standing for Christian values, and describes his mission as making pop culture, gaming, sci-fi, fantasy, and comics great again. When not busy defending lawsuits filed by his battered wife, John Del Arroz fights on pop culture's front lines for the anti-woke army. Starfleet Academy, he tells us, is insane with hard-left politics. Daredevil Born Again is woke and lame. Kanye West, apologizing for his anti-Semitism, did it because they somehow got to him. And Sonic the Hedgehog is being weaponized against ICE. And still, all of these pronouncements appear sane compared to his latest rant about the upcoming live-action Masters of the Universe. These people won't stop until they ruin everything, John mourned. They're giving He-Man pronouns. At which point, all of the internet dunked on him so badly, he was last seen going through the Earth's core and out the other side. Now, a little bit of context. So he latched onto a snippet of the trailer in which the non-superhero persona of He-Man is seen working at human resources in a big company with a sign on his desk that says he/him. Such an obvious joke about pronouns, right? It's poking fun at pronouns. He was not having any of it. He could see it in the casting where obviously he has never watched He-Man before because he complained about Tila being a very powerful character and rescuing He-Man all the time, which is kind of what she does. He complained about them making the tiger green, which is what Battle Cat is in the comics. It has always been green. Basically just went to battle with the entire internet going to him. How do you not see this is a poke at pronouns? So he has become this week's meme, basically. This week, He-Man is woke.
The person.
Because, they've added pronouns to him. He-Man.
It
whose
should just
name
be man.
was literally a pronoun.
Listeners, if you can top that, send it in to quietriotpod@gmail.com.
Quiet Riot.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Quiet Riot.
While Washington teeters between internal fracture and external belligerence, the rest of the world is being forced to recalibrate in real time. Donald Trump talks openly of more wars abroad while warning darkly of chaos at home, and now unveils what he grandly calls a new board of peace, a body apparently open to any billionaire willing to buy their way into global diplomacy. Meanwhile, the latest round of Ukraine-Russia talks have, unsurprisingly, ended with little to show beyond the sense that the old rules of negotiation may no longer apply. Into this shifting landscape steps Keir Starmer, who today finds himself in Beijing, attempting to reset Britain's relationship with China at a moment when alliances are fraying and power blocks hardening. Is this a necessary act of pragmatic engagement or a risky gamble as US-China rivalry intensifies? And how does the Labour government balance economic reality with national security, especially when Washington itself looks increasingly unpredictable? So we're now joined by Arthur Snell to help us make sense of a world where diplomacy feels ever more transactional and ideals are being tested by hard power. Are we witnessing the birth of a new global order, or simply the collapse of the old one without a replacement ready? Does Trump's vision of peace amount to anything more than a protection racket? Can Starmer chart an independent course without angering allies? And ultimately, are we heading for great expectations or yet more hard times? Arthur, welcome to the second half of the show. Good to have you with us.
Hi, everyone. Not sure I'll be able to bring sense, but I'll do my best.
Well, I'm going to throw a really tough, big question at you to kick us off. No gentle beginning to ease you in. Are we watching the emergence of a new world order, or are we still in the throes of the old one unraveling?
That is a great question. I think the old one is dead. I think we have to accept that. And I'm not sure whether the new one has taken shape yet. And I think we are certainly watching the building blocks be put into place. And to some extent, of course, perhaps this is what Mark Carney was saying in his speech at Davos, that we all in different ways have agency in this. And that new world doesn't have to be defined, for example, by Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping.
It's so interesting that you mentioned Carney, because as Naomi was asking that question, that's the speech that popped into my head, was the notion that maybe actually this is an opportunity to shape things in a better way, in a way that works better. Is there that, or am I being just my usual Pollyanna-ish self?
I don't think it's an impossibility. And of course, there's an expectation, isn't there? When a politician gives a speech, even one as smart and pragmatic as Carney, you expect them to say, this is my big vision and here's the new world that we can forge, rather than we're all going to hell in a handcart. But it's not ridiculous to say that, for example, middle powers could work together and collectively have a huge influence. You hear some people saying, I don't think as a literal idea, but as a kind of conceptual framework, that Canada could join the EU. And if you took the EU plus Canada plus the UK, you've got an enormous economic bloc and a pretty serious military bloc as well. So just conceptually, I don't think that's a crazy idea. The challenge is, of course, how do you make that happen? Because it needs real leadership, and it means that clearly Mark Carney's someone who's got vision, but he's also got domestic politics. And I don't really feel that there are many others with his sort of far-sighted vision leading medium-sized countries. And I know you've been talking about Keir Starmer earlier. I'm not sure that he is really in that category.
But he is going to China as we speak.
Yeah.
What do you hope he's trying to achieve in Beijing or not?
There's a strange kind of imbalance to the debate around Britain's relations with China. And I think most democracies have this problem where you have people who are saying we shouldn't have anything to do with China and saying that they shouldn't be allowed new embassies and that they represent a huge threat to us. And of course, they do represent a threat and they don't take privacy seriously. And we are very dependent on their technologies. And we all know that the plan was to strip Huawei out of 5G networks. And it's basically not been possible because there isn't other kit ready to put in. But on the other hand, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever to say that Britain should somehow not have a relationship with China. And certainly at a time when our relationship with America is changing rapidly and America is no longer a reliable partner and certainly doesn't see itself as a core ally of Europe, and including the UK in that. Of course, Keir Starmer needs to go to China. Now, I don't expect that he goes there, signs a treaty of eternal friendship and returns home with a kind of golden era redux in the way that George Osborne and David Cameron tried to do. But clearly, we need to be able to reassure the Chinese that we are people that we can do business with. We need to trade with them. And of course, we do trade with them. The fact is that on British roads, you see a lot of Chinese-made EVs. Now, there are plenty of Western countries where they're basically still not really allowed or certainly a tariff out of existence.
You talked to Dr. Samir Puri in the most recent episode of Behind the Lines. I found it a really interesting conversation because I had a sort of light bulb moment, which is always what one hopes when we're putting
that's what we're here for.
This is an astonishing press conference that Mark Carney delivered in Beijing, having just signed an enhanced strategic partnership with the Chinese.
Yeah.
And the key moment in the press conference came when a New York Times journalist asked the killer question, is the relationship that Canada has with China more predictable than the relationship Canada has with the US now? And Carney's response was really fascinating because he mentioned seeing Li Qiang and Xi Jinping at a succession of meetings over the last few months, saying that's a very consistent dialogue Canada's had with China, and said that, yes, the relationship with the US is more multifaceted than the one with China, but actually the Chinese relationship is more predictable, and he's seeing good results from it. Those of us who've worked on geopolitics in Asia talked about Asian countries hedging for years between China and the US.
Yeah.
Is this the first instance of a major Western country very actively hedging between China and the US? And I think the answer is yes. There is, I think, caution in the Canadian approach. Carney's an extremely astute operator. He's not suddenly jumping into bed with the Chinese with Canada's eyes closed in terms of what the consequences of this will be. But what I think is so interesting is the actual content of their China-Canada agreement, because there's a Canadian sort of endorsement of the Chinese claim to being a stable state in international affairs, one that's pursuing multilateralism and global governance. That is an astonishing statement by the Canadians, at least in this agreement, that they think China is a source of global stability. That, I think, is a fascinating outcome. So let's, of course, see where this goes. But I think in the longer term, the Trump administration is accidentally rewiring other parts of the world to lessen their dependencies on America.
He was saying that it's important not to conflate the old world order, new world order conversation with Trump's rashness. That what you have is two things going on at the same time. Firstly, the world is reshaping itself, and we need to be alive to that and create a foreign policy in which we can interact with this new state of affairs with multipolar defense rather than hegemonic protection. And then there is Trump rushing to basically almost cash in America's chips before it's no longer the undisputed superpower. What did you think of that point? Because I found it really fascinating, and it ties into all this Board of Peace stuff.
I suspect that one of the issues here is that you have Trump clearly at the top of a rather dysfunctional and clearly rather toxic US administration. But within that, there are still different ideologies, people with different objectives. And one of the basic ones, and we touched on that, Samir Puri and I, in our discussion, is the very kind of hawkish approach on China versus more of a sort of live and let live approach. And now the most recent national security strategy suggested that there's a version where America sees the Western Hemisphere, the Americas, as its patch, and it might want to abandon Europe to the Russians, and then China gets to be top dog in Asia. And that's a very crude division, but it seems to be this kind of spheres of influence. And so, yes, it has dislodged Russia and China from Venezuela, but it doesn't seek to dislodge Russia from Ukraine, just as an illustration of that. Trump is not very interested in anything except what makes him the center of attention, and probably things that actually make him richer. It seems perfectly possible that he's benefiting directly from the Venezuela seizure because there's this thing about the oil money going to an obscure account in Qatar. The Board of Peace, I'm sure we can talk more about, but again, the Board of Peace is a personal organization in which Donald Trump is the life chairman. So it's nothing to do with the US government in that respect. And again, it's not clear where the money goes, but it might well go to him. But clearly, within MAGA world, there are people who probably do want a much more confrontational approach to China, and those who equally don't want that, but want this kind of spheres of influence approach where America controls its hemisphere, but accepts that the rising China will basically eventually dominate Asia. And of course, the big flashpoint then becomes Taiwan. And maybe, although Taiwan is not given to China in the national security strategy, one senses that for a lot of people in MAGA world, if they could sort out their reliance on Taiwanese chips and they had a manufactory within the US, they wouldn't care about Taiwan itself.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Arthur, can I ask you about, just very quickly, sort of the rule of unintended consequences, which I think we're starting to see play out vis-a-vis Trump. I mean, this week, India and the EU finally managed to seal a trade pact. It's not the final deal by any stretch of the imagination, but it's been 20 years of on-off negotiations to try and land something. And I don't think we can consider it a coincidence of any sort that they're creating, by some measures, a $27 trillion market and slashing $4 billion of tariffs on EU exports to India at the same time as Trump is creating chaos and slapping tariffs left, right, and center. Do you think the law of unintended consequences is going to show us more of these sort of things happening, almost being the external shock that we quite often need for big change to happen?
Yeah, absolutely. You've noted there EU-India. So two other big ones that have occurred in the last month. EU-Mercosur, most of South America, basically. That one, again, 20 years in the making, it's still not quite over the line.
No, very much not.
But it's closer to being over the line than it's ever been.
Yeah.
And again, I don't think you can separate that from what Trump is doing. And then Canada-China, which Samir and I talk about in the podcast, again, Trump may try to sabotage that. But again, we get to the taco thing. Trump always chickens out. He threatens 100% tariffs on Canada. Well, let's see what the US stock market says about that, because I'm pretty sure the US stock market will not buy that. And then Trump will be forced to accept that Canada, which hasn't made a free trade deal with China, and Mark Carney's very clear, that's not what it is, but it has made an improved terms of trade deal with China. Again, it is doing that for the very specific reason. And we go back to Starmer visiting China. It's no coincidence he's doing it at a time when the degree to which we can rely on the US is shown to be really questionable.
Quiet Riot. Quiet Riot.
You've criticised Keir Starmer quite a lot for his position on China, going to China, saying that he's kowtowing to the Chinese. If you were Prime Minister, would you still be going to China? How would you do differently?
I would start by having an actual foreign policy. Keir Starmer is going to China, but he doesn't have a clear agenda. He's just running around. I said previously that he was like a plastic bag blowing with the wind. We have a huge trading relationship with China, but it is also a threat to our country. Cybersecurity, stealing intellectual property. Keir Starmer doesn't really know how to deal with China. So I'm worried about what he's going to be doing when he gets to China. He's probably going to give away the Isle of Wight before he comes back. Let's have an actual foreign policy.
Thank you very much. Can I just follow up on a question you were asked earlier that I don't think you gave a direct answer to? If you were Prime Minister, would you go to Beijing?
Would I be going to China? No, not now, because I don't think that this is the time to do that. We need to be talking to those other countries who are worried about the threat China is posing to them. We should be talking more to those countries who are aligned with our interests, not the country that is doing everything it can to undermine our economy. I think that that is what our Prime Minister should be talking about, and he needs to show strength. He looks like he gives way every time things get difficult, and that is the difference between Keir Starmer and myself.
Friedrich Merz visited China just before Davos, and now Starmer just after. I mean, there is a sense of we need to be getting on with where our place is in the world in which America is not a reliable ally.
And this point about reliability, because again, we are not necessarily asking Starmer or Merz or Carney, do you approve of China's approach to human rights or what they've done to Hong Kong or what they've done to the Uyghurs? What you're asking them is, can you make a reliable and predictable deal with these people in your mutual interest? And the answer is almost certainly yes. Whereas, can you make a deal with America that lasts more than 6 weeks? Well, no, you can't. I mean, we were invading Greenland on Monday last week, and by Friday, it was all fixed. Well, I doubt it is fixed, but the complete unpredictability and a sense that we really don't know where America's going next.
And just weeks ago, in a spectacular operation in Venezuela, we brought the outlaw dictator Nicolas Maduro to face American justice. In one of the most brilliant, lethal, quick, they've never seen violent operations ever seen, military operations ever seen. Nobody was killed. You know, the weather was off for 3 nights. It was not good, so I delayed it. The next night it was okay, but not great. I said, General, sir, they're ready to go, sir, they're okay. I said, but the weather's a little bad. I said, sir, they're ready to go. I said, God bless you, General. And by the way, there's another beautiful armada floating beautifully toward Iran right now. So we'll see. I hope they make a deal. I hope they make a deal. They should have made a deal the first time they'd have a country.
We've talked about Venezuela, Greenland, Ukraine, Russia, India, China, Europe. We skipped over Iran.
Yes.
I want to ask you, should we be bracing for a US strike on Iran very imminently?
Trump did something which was despicable, albeit he probably didn't even realize. He tweeted back on the 11th of January, help is on its way. Now, at the time, the US had no military assets in theater. And of course, Trump doesn't care about these things. He had a lot of assets at that point in the Caribbean because of the Venezuela operation. The regime in Iran has basically put down the protests just by complete mass slaughter on a scale that we're just coming to terms with, but it's pretty unimaginable, and it may take years to understand the scale of the losses. Trump has now shifted a big armada to that region, and I can't see any reason that he would do that except to take some action. He may feel that Venezuela is a model, that you assassinate the supreme leader. I doubt they could kidnap him. Now, at the time he said it, he had no resources there. So there was, whatever help he was proposing, even America, you can't just flick a switch and Delta Force shows up. They're, like all these things, there are logistics. Ships have to move. They move slowly. There's all these facts of life. But now he's there, now that he may feel slightly that he's been a bit humiliated by the Iranians because they basically said, well, help might be on his way, but we're going to kill everyone. And what are you going to do about it? One wonders. And one also wonders, as I say, because for him, personally, directly, Venezuela seems to have gone rather well. And maybe he's getting a taste for countries that have a lot of oil. And the Venezuela model is not bring in the liberals and the people who will change the country. The model is you get rid of the leader and you get someone that you can work with who's just
do
as
a deal with number
authoritarian.
two, basically.
Yeah, and then you cut a deal on oil sales.
Do you think that we're at the stage now where, because we've become so used to the chaos that Trump loves to sow, whether that's amongst his allies or his enemies, that the markets have to be pricing a lot of this stuff in now, though, don't they? They know that there's going to be a hit. And if that's the case, that's quite dangerous when we're pricing in chaos in this way, isn't it?
I'm definitely not a stock market expert. I'm really confused. I've talked to friends who sort of work in this space. Why the markets are going so well. Yes, you get a wobble when he does threaten Greenland directly, threatening literally the United States' oldest ally. And the markets just can't find a way to say this is fine. But they can find a way to say it's fine when you remove the president of Venezuela. Perhaps they'll find a way to say it's fine with Iran.
How important is what is happening internally, do we think? Minnesota, it seems to be descending to a state that looks very close to a junta to me. People grabbed from medical appointments, children arrested. Another innocent man was shot a few days ago. Even the NRA came out to reprimand the president. How far will this unravel, do you think? Or is that the aim, to provoke such disorder that the midterms are cancelled? Am I missing the end goal here?
It's a very American story, isn't it? You have this guy who is a nurse. He's clearly a public-spirited person. He's a brave person. He'd gone to film what ICE is up to. But he's also a man carrying a concealed weapon, which to those of us who are from Europe, we think that that's pretty weird. But within the American context, the fact that he was then murdered in cold blood, he hadn't drawn his weapon. He presented no threat to these people. But the fact that he was exercising his Second Amendment rights, which are so important to so many right-wing Americans, I think that has made it very difficult for Trump. And of course, the videos show very clearly, and I'm sure most listeners have seen them, that the guy presented no threat whatsoever at any stage. It seems clear that Trump does have this sort of political antenna. He has turned the dial down slightly. He's moved that guy, is it Bovino, the very hardline ICE commander, out. There seems to be a bit of a blame game now unfolding between Kristi Noem, who's Homeland Security, and Stephen Miller, who's the sort of basically the fascist inside the White House.
Noem feels like she's the next one that will be put out.
Because she's the sort of operational head that might roll. But it's an interesting question, isn't it, about the midterms, because we also know that Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, at one point in recent days, demanded that Minnesota release its full electoral roll to the federal government, and in a completely sort of meaningless and unrelated, really, to an immigration issue. So, it would be bizarre if they weren't planning something around the midterms, because they know that on any normal basis, they're going to lose and lose badly. And these are people that don't feel constrained by the rule of law. But it's difficult to know exactly. And of course, the way it works, as everyone will know, is that it's run at state level. States that are run by Democrats, Minnesota being a good example, they may be able to stand up to the federal government. I think we should be more worried about states like Florida and Texas, which, of course, still will return normally one or two Democrat members of Congress. And that's where it seems to me that the chances of the elections being run fairly are next to nothing.
How incredibly depressing. I am seeing a few more MAGA people beginning to turn. We saw a lot of them actually break cover from Trump alignment when the first assassination happened 3 weeks ago. Alex, you hawk what the MAGA movement is up to. Are you sensing that it was a kind of early flurry away and those that have stuck with him are loyal, or is it continuing to atrophy?
I'm sensing that it's actually Trump that is changing direction. I'll tell you why. I think it was significant that his first reaction to Renee Nicole Good, he was in an interview with the New York Times when that video became viral, and the journalist showed him the video, and his first reaction was, oh, no, it's horrible. He defended the ICE agents, but he said those are terrible situations. No one wants to see that. And then was convinced to go more hardline. His reaction to the second shooting is closer to what his initial reaction to Good being murdered was. And so I think we're seeing that Trump is much more alive to how the visual plays on TV. If there is one talent the guy has, is he understands how the couch potato watching TV and watching those videos will react to them. And I think he's the one that's got it right. And the Stephen Millers of the movement are the ones that got it wrong. Because I think he understands that there is a buildup of anxiety when people see someone doing nothing wrong just being gunned down, even his own voters, because they begin to feel, hold on, am I safe? And so I think he understands that. He understands how the visual will play into people's anxieties, something the others don't get. And I think he's the one that's beginning to change tack on this.
One of the most significant moments was when he was pressed on what Miller and Noam had said about Pretty. Trump is a man who knows more than anybody else about space travel and more than anybody else about energy and more than anybody else about every damn topic under the sun. And then he was asked what his opinion was about Miller and Noam's accusation that Pretty was a domestic terrorist. He said, I don't know anything about that. For me, that point where instead of going balls out, he resorted to his old-fashioned, I'm in a corner, I'm just going to tell a lie now. I don't know anything about that. It was the biggest giveaway for me of where he was and of the fact that a change was going to come as well.
And I have to say, with this stuff going on between Miller and Noam, the most likely long-term result is that they will both be punished or moved sideways or demoted. That is Trump's form. That's his MO. When people under him are fighting, what he sees is both of them not acknowledging that he's the boss. We will see a lot of people are saying, look, Stephen Miller is really in charge and Trump is completely lost. But Trump, he understands the power that he has with the media, with putting out a post, with a call to arms to his own MAGA people. And he acts impetuously, but never without purpose. And I think that is something that a lot of people fail to grasp. Because he acts impetuously and because he's chaotic, people think there's no purpose behind it. But in the moment he chooses to act in a particular way, he does so for a reason. It might disappear the next second, and the reason might be base and animalistic and irrational, but there is a reason.
I think also he's got this great advantage that because he has no fixed beliefs, he can be incredibly agile. So he can go from saying, this guy's a domestic terrorist, to this is terrible, who's responsible, will have their heads on the block. And for almost anyone else, that would be an unsustainable position. But for Donald Trump, it's relatively normal.
And there is a predictable logic about what his approach is as well. Just looking at the midterms, let's do a dangerous thing and assume elections do take place. Well, then the question will be, but were they fair elections? That becomes the next battleground. The next battleground after that is we don't accept the outcome of these elections. There's always another obvious step. And we're getting used to it, of course. It doesn't make it any less dangerous, but it does make it easier to predict just how the madness might play out.
Alex, you have found a very lovely call to action for our listeners, all of whom will, I'm sure, have watched with horror the footage coming out of Minneapolis. Tell us more.
There's a mutual aid organization called Stand With Minnesota that is fundraising for a number of other good charities working under the umbrella. So you can do things like help impacted families pay their rent, because one of the effects of these raids has been, of course, that people are afraid to go out. They're afraid to go to work because they think they'll get arrested. And a lot of these people are low-paid, cash-in-hand, casual labor. And they're facing real immediate difficulty right now. So you can do that. You can donate supplies to organizations that work on the front line, whistles, hand warmers, things like that, food support. You can support pets and animals, which again will be suffering the consequences of people being afraid literally to go out of their house because they think they will get arrested if they look a particular way or sound a particular way. So I think it's a very, very worthwhile cause, and I would encourage anyone who can afford a little bit to go and give.
And we will leave a link in the show notes to standwithminnesota.com.
Quiet, Riot.
And now it's time for a little shot of hope and optimism in our collective arm by turning to a story that proves the arc of history tends towards progress, even when it is hard to believe that. It is time for Grin and Share It.
Good news is welcome to me. Bad news is hell come to me.
What have you got for us, Naomi?
Prehistoric lawnmowers.
Okay. Just stop there.
Yeah, that's the end of the show.
This just makes me happier than any explanation will.
Every year seems to bring fresh horror of wildfire happening somewhere around the world, whether Greece, California, Ukraine, Portugal, to name just a few. Climate change is certainly having an impact alongside human-induced devastation to increase the frequency of uncontrollable fire. And just as I've eulogized about the reintroduction of beavers to help with flood defenses, I'm now going to bring you joy about bison helping avoid wildfire. So Europe's largest terrestrial mammal is now roaming Spain's Iberian highlands thanks to a nature restoration project which aims to tackle wildfires and boost biodiversity. So 9 bison have been released near the village of El Recuenco in Guadalajara province this week. The animals are keystone species. They help to reshape landscapes. They provide habitat for other plant life and animals. And so now researchers are going to monitor them and see how Europe's last wild bovine could help restore Mediterranean ecosystems. And we've seen similar reintroduction projects elsewhere, even here in the UK, and that's all helped boost bison numbers. And according to Rewilding Europe, the European bison population was nearly wiped out. There were fewer than 60 of them in 1927, and they were all in zoos and private parks. And now we've got about 9,000. That's risen from about 2,000 just over the last decade. So a real remarkable recovery happening there. Enrique Collada, who's El Recuenco's mayor, has said we expect the bison to help reduce the risk of catastrophic wildfire outbreaks through their grazing and browsing of the woodland. We're also hoping that this unique and iconic species will attract more visitors to our village, regenerating new opportunities, jobs and income for the people living here. So there we have it, Alex. Frankly, I welcome our new bison-based emergency services.
I love that story. Story. Yeah, it's great. I look forward to seeing bison roam in Greece again, which suffers from terrible wildfires. Yeah, and we will drop a link in the show notes, of course, listeners, so you can not just grin, but also share this bovine good news.
And that's the end of the show. A huge thank you to Arthur for dropping by.
Always a pleasure.
And thank you everyone at home for tuning in too. Don't forget our next editorial meeting takes place on the 17th of February at 6:30, where we will be planning the shape of the show for the next quarter. So we look forward to seeing you there, and please don't miss out.
Yeah, and if you want to be a part of that, then you know what to do. Head on over to ko-fi.com/QuietRiotPod and sign up for £5 a month or more to receive an invite. And if you're already backing us, thank you very, very much. Please sleep soundly, knowing that your good deed allows us to keep making this show free for everyone at the same time.
And don't forget that the second season of Podyssey starts on Saturday, my birthday.
Yay!
With a very timely, with a very timely episode on Prometheus. And this gang will be back on Sunday. So until then, stay safe, stay warm, and stay rioting quietly. We love you lots and lots. Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Alex Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese.
Quiet Riot.
Unfortunately, the interview went sideways almost immediately when Trump said this about his father, Fred. At a certain age, about 86, 87, he started getting, what do they call it? Trump pointed to his forehead and looked to his press secretary for the word that escaped him, to which she responded, Alzheimer's. Okay. The reporter, he pressed Trump on whether he worries about his family's history of dementia. Trump played it cool, saying, I don't think about it at all. You know why? Because he already forgot the question. Is that why? Is that?
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again, but if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift, well, Mint Mobile is extending their holiday offer of half off unlimited wireless. So here's the idea. You get it now, You call it an early present for next year. What do you have to lose?
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Limited time 50% off regular price for new customers. Upfront payment required. $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan. Taxes and fees extra. Speeds may slow after 50 gigabytes per month when network is busy. See terms.